Imagine this. A young boy stands in a smoky temple with his hand on a bloody altar, and he's swearing to destroy the mightiest empire on earth. That boy? Hannibal Barca, the genius warrior who crossed mountains with elephants, wiped out entire Roman armies, and brought the superpower of Rome to the brink of collapse. His story is one of revenge, brains over brawn, and battles that still blow minds today. Back in the 3rd century BC, the Mediterranean was like a giant game of king of the hill, and Rome was starting to climb to the top. But across the sea in North Africa, in what's now Tunisia, there was this powerhouse city called Carthage. It was founded by traders from the Middle East around 814 BC, and they were master sailors and merchants. Think of them as the Amazon of the ancient world because they controlled shipping lanes, had colonies from Spain to Sicily, and got rich from things like silver mining, farming huge grain fields, and even making purple dye from sea snails, which was super expensive and fancy. Carthage had a massive navy, elected leaders called suffetes, and a council of rich folks running the show. But they clashed hard with Rome over who dominated the Western Mediterranean, especially Sicily, which sat right in the middle. The bad blood started with the First Punic War. Punic just meant Phoenician in Latin, so it was Rome's way of labeling Carthaginians as outsiders. It was mostly a naval war, and Rome, who weren't great sailors at first, built ships fast and won by boarding enemy vessels like pirates. Carthage lost Sicily, had to pay massive fines, and even gave up their warships. It crippled them, and it left a ton of anger and resentment. That's where Hannibal's dad, Hamilcar Barca, comes in. Hamilcar was a star general for Carthage during that war, and he fought brilliantly in Sicily, using hit-and-run tactics to hold off Romans for years. But Carthage's leaders surrendered anyway, which really ticked him off. He saw Rome as bullies who stole their power and humiliated his people. So Hamilcar carried that grudge like a badge and vowed revenge. After the war, he took his family to Spain to rebuild Carthage's strength. He conquered local tribes, mined silver, and trained a new army. He died in battle around 229 BC, drowning while crossing a river under attack. But before that, he made sure his hatred lived on. Hannibal Barca was born in 247 BC, right in the middle of that first war in Carthage. As a kid, he tagged along with his dad on campaigns and learned war from the ground up. The defining moment came when Hannibal was about 9 years old. Hamilcar took him to a temple in Spain, right before a big campaign, and over a sacrificial fire, he made the boy swear an oath. "I promise that as soon as I'm able, I'll use fire and steel to destroy the Romans." It wasn't just words. Hannibal carried that promise his whole life, like a personal mission. After Hamilcar died, Hannibal's brother-in-law Hasdrubal took over in Spain, expanding the territory and signing a treaty with Rome to stay south of the Ebro River. Hannibal served as an officer, fighting tribes and sharpening his skills. When Hasdrubal got killed in 221 BC, probably by a local tribesman, Hannibal stepped up at age 26. The army loved him and voted him commander, and Carthage's council back home approved. He married a Spanish woman named Emilce to build alliances and spent 2 years securing Spain with smart battles, like crossing the Tagus River to crush enemies. But he had his eyes on Rome. In 219 BC, he attacked Saguntum, a Spanish city allied with Rome north of the Ebro, which broke that treaty. Why? It was a deliberate move to start a fight. The siege lasted 8 months, with Hannibal's men using massive battering rams, towers, and starvation tactics. Romans sent warnings like, "Back off or it's war," but Hannibal ignored them, took the city, and sold the survivors as slaves. The Second Punic War kicked off in 218 BC, and Rome declared war, expecting to crush Carthage again. But Hannibal flipped the script. Instead of waiting for Rome to invade Africa, or fighting at sea where Rome was getting better, he decided to take the war straight to Italy. He gathered 50,000 infantry, tough Africans and wild warriors from Gaul, 9,000 cavalry. His secret weapon was speedy riders from North Africa called Numidians, and 37 war elephants, which were basically ancient tanks for scaring enemy. He marched from Spain, crossing the Pyrenees Mountains, fighting through Gaul, that's France, and then, get this, the Alps. No one had done that with an army before. The Alps were absolute hell. Freezing snowstorms, narrow paths where avalanches buried men, slippery ice causing falls into deep ravines. Local tribes ambushed them, rolling boulders down slopes, and Hannibal lost an eye to an infection from swampy water. But he motivated his exhausted troops with speeches like, "Beyond these mountains lies the heart of the enemy, Italy, rich and waiting." They used vinegar and fire to crack boulders blocking their path. After 15 brutal days, he made it to northern Italy with only 26,000 men and a few elephants left. Half his army was gone, but the survivors were battle-hardened and loyal. Romans were shocked because no scouts saw it coming. It was like an invader popping up in your backyard. His first clash was at the Ticinus River in November 218 BC. The Roman consul Scipio led a scouting force, but Hannibal's cavalry charged, outflanked them, and sent the Romans running. Scipio got wounded. Next came the Battle of Trebia in December. Another consul named Sempronius had 40,000 men. Hannibal lured them across an icy river at dawn, and his spies knew the Romans hadn't eaten. Wet, cold, and tired, they formed up while Hannibal hid 2,000 men under his brother Mago in the reeds. As the main lines clashed, Mago's ambush hit the Roman rear, and Hannibal's cavalry flanked the sides. Total chaos. 30,000 Romans were dead or captured, while Hannibal lost maybe 5,000. He treated survivors well to win allies, saying he fought Rome, not the Italian people. In spring 217 BC, Hannibal marched south, crossing flooded marshes in the Apennines, where he lost his eye to an infection from the muck. He baited the new consul Flaminius into chasing him to Lake Trasimene, and Hannibal hid his army in hills overlooking the lake road. Fog rolled in at dawn, and as 30,000 Romans marched single file by the water, Hannibal's men poured down. There was no room to form proper battle lines, so Romans got trapped against the lake. In 3 hours, 15,000 died, including Flaminius, and thousands drowned trying to swim away. It was an ambush masterclass, using terrain like a weapon. Rome panicked and appointed Fabius as dictator. He shadowed Hannibal but avoided fights, starving his supply lines instead. They called it the Fabian strategy, delay and harass. Hannibal ravaged farms to force a battle, but Fabius held back. The Romans, completely fed up, raised their biggest army ever, 86,000 men under consuls Varro and Paulus. Hannibal had 50,000. On a flat plain in southern Italy, he positioned his weaker infantry from Spain and Gaul in the center, bulging forward like a crescent. His elite African troops were on the wings, cavalry on the flanks. Varro attacked head-on, pushing the center back, and Romans thought they were winning as they packed in tight. But it was a trap. Hannibal's center held just long enough for his cavalry, led by Hasdrubal, to crush the Roman horsemen and circle back. The African troops swung in from the sides, double envelopment. Romans were surrounded with no escape. In one afternoon, 70,000 died in absolute slaughter, blood running ankle deep. Paulus fell, Varro escaped. Rome lost more in a single day than in some whole wars. Hannibal controlled southern Italy for years, with cities like Capua switching sides to join him. He hoped for a full revolt, but Romans held the north. But there was no killer blow because Carthage sent little help. His brother Hasdrubal tried reinforcing him via the Alps in 207 BC, but he got ambushed at the Metaurus River. Romans beheaded him and tossed his head into Hannibal's camp, crushing morale. By 203 BC, a Roman general named Scipio invaded Africa, beating Carthaginian allies. Hannibal sailed home after 15 years in Italy. At Zama in 202 BC, his 50,000 men faced Scipio's 40,000. Hannibal's 80 elephants charged first, but Scipio opened lanes in his lines, letting them pass through harmlessly, then used trumpets to scare them back into Hannibal's own troops. 20,000 Carthaginians died. Hannibal escaped, but urged surrender. The treaty destroyed Carthage. They lost Spain, paid 10,000 talents in fines, and scrapped their navy. Hannibal switched to politics. Elected Suffet in 195 BC, like a chief leader, he fought corruption, reformed taxes, and paid off debts early without burdening people. But Romans, still paranoid, demanded his arrest, so he fled to the east, advising kings like Antiochus of Syria against Rome. In 190 BC, he commanded a fleet but lost to Rhodes, though he still innovated by hurling jars of venomous snakes onto ships to cause panic. He bounced around Armenia and Bithynia, winning land battles. But in 183 BC, betrayed in Bithynia, Romans cornered him. He took poison from his ring, saying, "Let us relieve the Romans of their long anxiety. They think it's too long to wait for the death of a hated old man." He died at 64. Hannibal's legacy? He terrified Rome so much that the phrase "Hannibal at the gates" meant ultimate fear. His battles, especially Cannae, inspired generals like Napoleon, who also crossed the Alps, and modern strategists. He showed that brains and boldness can challenge giants. And Hannibal proved that one person's grudge can echo through centuries.